Did you know the UK economy is currently in its worst shape in over 30 years? That's right. Wages are stagnating, prices are skyrocketing, and jobs are disappearing at an alarming rate. But what's really shocking is how fast it happened. Just a few years ago, the UK was considered one of the most prosperous economies in the world. Now, it feels like the wheels are coming off. In fact, the UK's GDP has been slowing for years. Inflation is at a 40-year high, and the cost of living is pushing millions of people to the brink. You might think these problems are just a temporary blip, but they're actually the result of deep-rooted issues that have been decades in the making. So what's really going on? Why has the UK's economy gone from thriving to barely surviving? It's not just one thing. It's a combination of factors: Brexit, the pandemic, global supply chains breaking down, political chaos, and more. The UK has been hit from all sides, and now it's struggling to keep up with the modern global economy. In this video, we're going to dive deep into 10 shocking reasons why the UK's economy has stopped working, and what it means for your future. Some of these facts might surprise you. Others might even make you question everything you thought you knew about the UK's financial stability. Stick around till the end. You won't believe how it all ties together. Number 1. Decline of manufacturing and deindustrialization. For much of the 20th century, the UK was a global leader in manufacturing. Cities like Sheffield, Manchester, and Birmingham were famous for producing steel, textiles, and machinery that powered the Industrial Revolution and supported economies worldwide. But over the last few decades, this industrial dominance has slowly disappeared. So what happened? Globalization played a huge role. As countries like China and India became manufacturing giants, the cost of labour in the UK, already higher than in many other parts of the world, made it difficult for UK factories to compete. Why pay workers in the UK when you can outsource production to places where wages are a fraction of the cost? The shift from a manufacturing economy to a service-based economy didn't help either. While sectors like finance, insurance, and real estate grew rapidly, industries like steel production, shipbuilding, and car manufacturing shrank. The UK began to rely more on selling services, like banking and insurance, than producing physical goods. But services are often less reliable as a long-term economic driver. The consequences: job losses in traditional industries left many workers without viable alternatives, particularly in the North and the Midlands. Entire communities were devastated as factories closed and left behind, crumbling infrastructure and high unemployment rates. Take Sheffield, for instance, once known as the steel capital of the world. It now faces a far bleaker reality: high unemployment, lower wages, and a diminished sense of pride in local industry. What's worse, many of the jobs that have replaced these manufacturing positions are lower paid, part-time, or insecure service sector jobs. The decline of manufacturing didn't just harm the workforce, it had ripple effects across the entire economy, stifling growth and leaving regions behind. Number 2. High dependency on financial services. The UK's economy has become increasingly dependent on the financial sector, particularly since the 1980s. London, with its iconic skyline filled with towering banks, insurance companies, and investment firms, has long been considered the financial capital of the world. But this heavy reliance on financial services has proven to be both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, the financial sector has contributed massively to the UK's GDP, employing hundreds of thousands and attracting global investments. However, there's a dark side to this dependency. When the global financial crisis hit in 2008, the vulnerabilities of an economy reliant on finance became starkly apparent. The crash exposed how fragile the UK economy had become, driven by risky lending, speculative investments, and unchecked growth in the financial markets. The aftermath of the crisis left the country with a slow and uneven recovery. GDP growth was sluggish for years, with many regions outside of London feeling the long-term effects. The finance industry, which was seen as the golden goose, faced massive government bailouts, while the real economy, manufacturing, agriculture, and other sectors suffered from underinvestment. What's more, the financial sector's boom and bust nature creates economic instability. Unlike industries that produce tangible goods, finance relies on trust, speculation, and global interconnectedness, which makes it vulnerable to shocks. When markets falter or global conditions change, the ripple effects are often felt throughout the entire economy. As the UK became increasingly dependent on finance, other sectors, especially manufacturing and tech, fell by the wayside. The result? A lack of diversification. The economy became lopsided, with fewer industries able to contribute to growth during times of financial instability. In the end, while the finance sector may have made the UK wealthy in certain periods, its volatility has left the country exposed to greater risks and economic challenges. Number 3. The impact of Brexit. When the UK voted to leave the European Union in 2016, many believed it would lead to greater economic freedom and new trade opportunities. However, the reality has been far more complex. Brexit has not only disrupted the UK's relationship with its closest trading partners, but has also brought about long-term economic consequences that continue to be felt today. One of the most immediate effects of Brexit was the imposition of trade barriers with the EU, which remains the UK's largest trading partner. The introduction of customs checks, tariffs, and regulatory differences has made it more difficult and expensive for UK businesses to trade with European countries. This has especially hurt industries that rely on quick, seamless trade, such as the food sector, where fresh produce now faces delays at the border, causing shortages and increased costs. But it wasn't just about trade. Investment from foreign companies into the UK also began to dry up post-Brexit. The uncertainty around regulations, market access, and future trade deals made the UK a less attractive destination for investment. Financial institutions, in particular, have moved operations out of London and into cities like Dublin and Frankfurt to maintain uninterrupted access to the EU market. Brexit has also led to labour shortages, especially in key sectors like healthcare, agriculture, and hospitality. Many European workers who had made the UK their home left or were deterred from coming due to new immigration rules. With industries already struggling to fill vacancies, the loss of skilled labour has only worsened the situation. Politically, Brexit has also contributed to instability. Constant debates, shifts in leadership, and changing policies have left the UK's economic strategy unclear. As the UK navigates this new, uncertain path outside the EU, its economy continues to face the fallout of decisions that have altered its place in the global market. Number 4. Skyrocketing inflation and cost of living crisis. In recent years, inflation in the UK has surged to levels not seen in decades, pushing the cost of everyday goods and services to unaffordable heights for many. The cost of living crisis has become one of the defining economic challenges facing the country, and it has had a profound impact on both families and businesses. One of the key drivers behind this surge in inflation has been the dramatic increase in energy prices. The global energy crisis, partly driven by geopolitical tensions and supply chain disruptions, led to spiralling gas and electricity costs. For UK households, this meant higher utility bills, with many struggling to keep up as their energy expenses ballooned. But it didn't stop there. Fuel prices at the pump also shot up, adding to the financial strain felt across the country. The rise in energy costs had a domino effect, causing prices to climb in other areas. Food prices have risen sharply, partly due to higher production costs, transportation expenses, and poor harvests influenced by climate change. For families, this means paying more for essentials like bread, milk, and vegetables, all while wages have not kept up with inflation. This has created a situation where millions are finding it harder to make ends meet. For the average Brit, this means a painful squeeze on disposable income. In fact, real wages have been stagnating. meaning that even though people may be earning the same or slightly more, their purchasing power is weaker than before. The middle class, in particular, has felt this shift acutely, as their standard of living has been significantly eroded. What's more, this rising inflation has contributed to a sense of economic insecurity, with many uncertain about how long the crisis will last. For businesses, higher costs translate into lower profits, reduced investment, and in some cases, even closures. The UK's economy is caught in a vicious cycle of rising prices, stagnant wages, and reduced consumer confidence, making it even harder to break free from this cost of living crisis. Number 5. Austerity measures and public sector cuts. In response to the financial crisis of 2008, the UK government implemented a series of austerity measures, aiming to reduce the national deficit by cutting public spending. At the time, these policies were framed as necessary for restoring economic stability. However, in hindsight, their long-term impact has been far more damaging than anticipated, contributing significantly to the UK's economic struggles. Austerity primarily involved reductions in government funding for public services, including healthcare, education, and social welfare. The National Health Service, NHS, for example, has been under intense strain, with staff shortages, longer waiting times, and increased pressure on already overwhelmed facilities. Despite the increasing demand for healthcare services, funding cuts made it harder to provide high-quality care. This, in turn, contributed to a growing sense of frustration among the public, particularly those who rely on these services the most. In education, cuts to school budgets meant that many institutions were forced to lay off staff, increase class sizes, and reduce resources for students. Schools in disadvantaged areas, in particular, felt the brunt of these cuts, widening the gap in educational outcomes between rich and poor. Meanwhile, welfare programs meant to support vulnerable populations were slashed, leaving many facing higher levels of poverty and social inequality. With benefits reduced or frozen and social housing in short supply, those already struggling found it even harder to make ends meet. The austerity agenda was supposed to reduce the national debt, but instead, it led to higher inequality and social unrest. Furthermore, the cuts to public sector jobs resulted in an inefficient government workforce where fewer people were doing more work. The loss of skilled public servants and the erosion of local services led to diminished productivity across the economy. While austerity may have provided short-term fiscal relief, its long-term effects have hindered economic recovery, deepened social divides, and made it harder for the UK to build a more sustainable and equitable future. Number 6. Declining productivity and innovation. One of the most significant issues plaguing the UK economy today is the decline in productivity. Over the past decade, the UK has consistently lagged behind other developed nations in terms of output per hour worked, a key indicator of economic health. Low productivity means that the economy is producing less value for each unit of labour, which directly impacts growth, wages, and living standards. A major factor contributing to this decline is underinvestment in both technology and infrastructure. While countries like Germany and South Korea have made substantial investments in advanced machinery, research and development, the UK has often been slow to adopt cutting-edge technologies. Without modern tools, businesses struggle to maintain competitiveness in a rapidly changing global market. For many industries, this means staying stuck in outdated practices that limit their potential to innovate and grow. On top of that, the UK has faced significant challenges when it comes to skills development. While the country has a well-established education system, there has been a mismatch between the skills workers have and the skills employers need. Many workers are not receiving the necessary training to thrive in a modern economy, especially in sectors like technology, digital services, and engineering. The result? A skills gap that leaves businesses unable to fill high-demand, high-skilled positions reducing overall productivity. The decline in manufacturing, which was once a cornerstone of the UK economy, also plays a role here. Manufacturing sectors are typically more productive than many service industries, and as the UK has shifted towards services, it has lost much of that higher productivity base. Many service-based jobs, particularly in retail and hospitality, have lower levels of innovation and productivity compared to those in tech-driven sectors. Ultimately, the UK's failure to address its productivity crisis is a key reason why its economy struggles to reach its full potential. Without greater investment in technology, skills, and infrastructure, the country's growth will remain sluggish, with long-term consequences for living standards and global competitiveness. Number 7. The housing crisis and wealth inequality. The UK's housing crisis is one of the most visible and pressing issues contributing to its economic struggles. Over the past few decades, the cost of housing has soared, leaving many young people and low-income families priced out of the market. This has created a massive divide in wealth and opportunity, further deepening the gap between the rich and the rest of the population. At the heart of the housing crisis is the lack of affordable homes. The UK simply hasn't built enough new housing to meet the growing demand, especially in urban areas where jobs and amenities are concentrated. In cities like London, the price of property has skyrocketed, making home ownership an unattainable dream for many. Even renting is increasingly expensive, with private landlords raising rents at rates that far outpace wage growth. This leaves an entire generation stuck in unstable rental markets, unable to save for a future home. The rise in house prices, while a boon for property owners, has created severe wealth inequality. Homeowners see their property values increase, while renters are left behind, often seeing a large portion of their income swallowed up by rent. For many, this means they can't accumulate wealth or invest in their future, keeping them in a perpetual state of financial insecurity. Moreover, the inability to own a home or secure long-term housing creates a sense of economic uncertainty. People are less likely to invest in local businesses or contribute to their communities when they don't have a stable place to live. The lack of affordable housing also contributes to lower social mobility, trapping people in areas of poverty and limiting their access to opportunities that might help them break the cycle of inequality. The housing crisis isn't just a social issue, it's a deeply economic one. The high cost of living and wealth inequality created by the housing market are major barriers to long-term economic stability and growth. Without significant reforms in housing policy and investment in affordable homes, the UK's economic future will remain at risk. Number 8. The shrinking workforce and ageing population. Another critical factor contributing to the UK's economic woes is its shrinking workforce, a trend driven by an ageing population and low birth rates. Over the last few decades, the UK's demographic structure has been shifting. The proportion of older people in society has been steadily increasing, while the working age population has been shrinking. This demographic imbalance is creating significant challenges for the economy. The most immediate impact of an ageing population is the strain on public services, particularly the National Health Service, NHS, and social care. As the number of elderly citizens rises, the demand for healthcare and elderly care services skyrockets, putting immense pressure on an already stretched system. More healthcare workers and social care staff are needed, but the workforce in these sectors is insufficient, leading to longer wait times and reduced quality of care. This not only impacts the well-being of the population, but also places a financial burden on the state to fund these services. At the same time, the number of people entering the workforce is falling. Low birth rates mean fewer young people are entering the job market, which is exacerbated by a growing number of early retirements. The gap between retirees and younger workers is widening, and this imbalance is particularly problematic in certain industries where experienced workers are leaving, and not enough young talent is stepping in. This shift also affects the productivity of the economy. An older workforce tends to be less adaptable to new technologies and less mobile geographically, leading to lower innovation and efficiency in the economy. As older generations retire, the UK is facing a skills shortage, particularly in sectors like technology, engineering, and healthcare, further hindering economic growth. If the UK doesn't take action to address this issue, whether by encouraging higher birth rates, increasing immigration, or investing in automation, its workforce will continue to shrink, which will inevitably slow down the economy. Without a balanced and dynamic workforce, the UK risks becoming less competitive on the global stage, ultimately limiting its economic potential. Number 9. The impact of global supply chain disruptions. In recent years, global supply chain disruptions have had a profound impact on the UK economy, exacerbating its existing problems and hindering its ability to recover. These disruptions, which began with the COVID-19 pandemic and were further amplified by geopolitical tensions, have affected everything from food and energy to manufacturing and retail. The UK, as a global trading nation, has felt these effects deeply. The pandemic was the first major catalyst in the disruption of supply chains. Lockdowns, factory shutdowns, and shipping delays created massive bottlenecks in global trade. For the UK, this meant shortages in essential goods like medical supplies, food, and electronics. As supply chains struggled to meet demand, prices for many items soared, contributing to rising inflation and making everyday life more expensive for consumers. The situation worsened with the war in Ukraine. The conflict led to skyrocketing energy prices, with the UK heavily reliant on energy imports from Europe and Russia. This resulted in supply shortages in everything from gas to wheat, which in turn caused further inflation in essential sectors like food and transport. The increase in energy costs also had a knock-on effect on manufacturing industries that rely on cheap energy, driving up production costs and making British goods more expensive to produce and export. Brexit has only added to the complexity of these supply chain issues. The UK's exit from the European Union has led to customs delays, increased paperwork, and border checks that slow down the flow of goods between the UK and the EU. For businesses that relied on just-in-time inventory models, this has been particularly disruptive, leading to stock shortages and delayed deliveries. The effects of these disruptions have been felt across multiple sectors, from retailers facing empty shelves to manufacturers struggling to get raw materials. The knock-on impact has been a slower economic recovery, as businesses face rising costs and reduced output. Until global supply chains stabilise, the UK's economy will continue to face these challenges, with long-term implications for growth and competitiveness. Number 10. Political instability and lack of long-term strategy. The final piece of the puzzle, when examining why the UK's economy has stopped working, is the issue of political instability and the lack of a cohesive, long-term economic strategy. In recent years, the UK has faced a revolving door of political leaders, shifting policies, and constant debates over national priorities. This turbulence has created a climate of uncertainty, both for businesses and for everyday citizens. Since the Brexit referendum in 2016, the UK has been caught in a cycle of political disarray. The decision to leave the EU led to years of contentious negotiations, shifting government positions, and a public deeply divided on the issue. This political paralysis has been damaging in itself. Without clear leadership or consensus, the country struggled to define its future relationship with the EU and the wider world. Trade deals, regulatory frameworks, and investment strategies were all delayed or undermined by the inability to settle on a clear path forward. Adding to this political instability has been a change in leadership within the UK government, with numerous prime ministers coming and going within a short span. Each new leader brought their own policies, often reversing the plans of their predecessor, which created an atmosphere of uncertainty. For businesses, This has been a nightmare. With no consistent strategy in place, companies have been hesitant to invest in long-term projects or expansion, opting instead for caution. Perhaps most troubling is the UK's inability to devise a long-term economic vision. Short-term policies and reactionary measures have dominated the political discourse, but there's been a lack of investment in the future, whether that's in emerging technologies, sustainable energy, or education. With no clear strategy to address the UK's structural economic problems, the country has struggled to adapt to the rapidly changing global economy. This lack of political direction and policy consistency has left the UK economically adrift. Without strong, stable leadership and a forward-thinking economic plan, the UK is unlikely to achieve the growth and stability needed to recover fully from its current crisis. The ongoing political instability and lack of strategic planning are contributing factors in why the UK's economy is struggling to regain its footing on the global stage. So there you have it, 10 key reasons why the UK economy has come to a grinding halt. From the devastating effects of Brexit and the pandemic to the mounting challenges of an ageing population and global supply chain disruptions, the UK is facing a perfect storm of economic crises. Add in the cost of living crisis, austerity measures, and a shrinking workforce, and it's clear that the road to recovery won't be easy. But here's the good news. Understanding these issues is the first step toward finding real solutions. By addressing the skills gap, improving political stability, and investing in long-term strategies for economic growth, the UK has a chance to rebuild. But it will take bold action, sustained effort, and most importantly, unity. If you're as shocked by these facts as we are, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated with more deep dives into the most important issues facing the UK today. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below with what you think the UK government should do next to fix the economy. Don't miss our other videos. Thanks for watching.